was brought up with lots of animals. There were draft horses, a cow, geese, ducks, chickens, dogs, cats, and it was basically a farm. I was surrounded by aunts and uncles, cousins, and I had the best childhood ever. I was brought up in West Street, Pascoe Vale. It was really a free and wonderful time to be brought up. I had no worries about anything at all, and it was just after the war, and I believe we were very poor then, but everybody else was too. But it was a sharing time. Everybody shared with what they had. If you had an apple tree, you'd trade for somebody with an apricots. And school days, when I went to West Breen, it was 2 rooms. Went up to grade 6, but there were only 2 teachers. There were no streets made or anything, and if it rained or if it was stormy, there was a little bus used to go from West Breen down to Bell Street and into Coburg, and that's because nobody had cars. That's how you got down to Coburg, and you wore your gumboots down to the bus stop. Then you left your gumboots in the little shelter shed that was there and wore your shoes so you didn't ruin your shoes in the mud. But nobody ever took anybody else's gumboots. It was always very honest. My dad won a contract down at Werribee because he had tip trucks, and my mum decided rather than him go down there and live by himself, we'd all go. So we actually lived in tents for 6 months on the foreshore in Werribee South. But that was during the winter, and I don't know how my mum did that because that was very cold. Sometimes very scary because it was very foggy and you could hear the ships in the bay with their foghorns going and warning one another. But us kids again thought it was a wonderful life. And I can remember Mum buying us some gumboots, and we walked out into the ocean just to see how far we could walk until our gumboots filled up with water, and then we got to Strife. Being brought up with all the horses, and then I used to go up to Middle Street in Glenroy and watch my uncle plough the ground up there, and we'd sit there, and my aunt used to make the best rock cakes in the world, and we used to love going with him and eating his lunch, which was a bit cheeky. And then we'd go back with the draft horses in the back of the cart, and we'd all be sitting up in there going back through the paddocks, taking shortcuts back to put the horses in the stables. My dad had a canopy made on the tip truck, and us kids would just take our beds out from the house, put them in the back of the truck, get in the back of the truck, sit up on our beds, and off we'd go camping. Again, I don't think it was so easy for Mum, but my dad barracked for Carlton big time, and my uncles were all Essendon because Pascoe Vale being close to Essendon, and the noise used to be unreal because they'd all be, especially if it was Carlton and Essendon, they didn't argue, but it was just an amazing time where they were all yelling and screaming and yelling at one another whose was the best team and everything. It was good, and they were family times too because we'd all be sitting around the radio. No such thing as TV. I can't remember, I probably was about 6 or 7 before we got the electricity on. I can remember having kerosene lamps on the table, and I can remember my mum's joy when we got the power put on, and she got all those kerosene lamps and threw them all in the tip down the back of the stables. I wish I knew that where they were now because they'd be worth a fortune. I used to love it in the springtime because we had just a tiny kitchen, but we had a wood stove, a black wood stove that my mum always cooked on. She didn't have anything else. And sometimes we'd come out of a morning and there'd be a baby lamb or 2 sitting by the fire, keeping it warm. We were allowed to keep that baby lamb until it grew up, but then we always had to promise they had to go back, which was pretty difficult. But as far as we know, it never went to the market. They were always kept as special sheep.